Now, I think we do have a quorum. 1, 2, 3. Yes, we do. Okay, so we have a quorum, so I am going to call this meeting to order. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So just a couple of things. First of all, we are doing a fully virtual meeting tonight, so I just want to expound on that a little bit. I decided to try it out for a multitude of reasons. First of all, I think the meetings in Foley, despite the best efforts of everybody, have not been the smoothest. That's been both in terms of production of the meeting, but also the speaking and presenting has been a little challenging just to be able to see everything clearly and that type of thing. And even meeting there since the outset, we've never had everybody in the committee in the room at once or really even close. And we've had virtually no public in the room since our reception, but so perhaps this will be easier, but certainly just as easy. So when we discussed this a little bit in one of our working sessions, there is some merit to maybe following presentations will be a little bit easier on the screen. Again, back the Foley was either looking a long way across the room or on your screen there. So, and our meetings, as everyone knows, are pretty heavily screen dependent. So we'll see how it goes. I admit I am not usually overall a big fan of a virtual meeting. Back in 2020 and 21, when I was chairman of the city council, that's all we had for almost the entire time I was chairman. So it kind of brings back a little bit of bad memories, but I think it was worth trying it. So we're going to do that tonight. Probably do it for a while. And this wasn't the reason for it, but it is a truism. I think it is a little bit more convenient for our consultants who have to travel to Framingham far and wide. So if we can make it a little bit easier for them, that's fine too. And I'll certainly welcome anybody's feedback as we try it a couple of times and see whether we think it works or whether we don't think it works. But that's the rationale from behind it. So I guess the easiest way as we go through this will be to raise your virtual hands if you could when you want to be recognized. We'll have to do roll call votes as always, but that's always the case. Anyways, so with that, I would accept any public comment. If anybody, I don't see anybody. I see one person, I do not see their hand up. So for that reason, I would assume we have no public participation. So the next item would be to review the meeting minutes and take a motion to approve the May 4th, 2026 meeting minutes.
So moved.
Okay.
Seconded.
So moved and seconded. So unfortunately, I take a roll call vote on all of these. I'm going to just read it across my screen as it appears, but as you know, the screen sometimes jumps around. So if you don't get called at the end of a roll call, just let me know. So just the way I see it, I'll go back and forth different directions. But anyways, so I'll start with myself. Yes. Adam?
Yes.
Brent?
Yes.
Brittany?
Yes.
David?
Yes.
Rachel?
Yes.
Michaela? Sorry, Jess?
Yes.
Scott?
Yes.
And did I miss anybody?
Mateo's a yes.
Okay, thank you. All right.
Mr. Chair, we have our newest member, Shreya, here for her first meeting.
We do, Shreya, thank you. We have spoken previously. I'm trying to differentiate. Everybody's wish we had a way of differentiating the committee and the consultants, but I will get through it. Anyways, now my screen just moved. Someone started sharing this. So Shreya, thank you. She was appointed by the mayor and is joining the committee for the first time tonight. Next will be a motion to approve the invoices for the month ending April of 2026. Someone like to make a motion?
So moved.
Okay, I heard Mr. Wadler move it. So I'll give a second to Mr. Freuberg, and I will take a vote. Shreya, do you want to vote tonight? I cannot hear you for some reason. Can anyone else hear her? It shows you as off mute, but I can't hear you.
How's that?
That's good. Yep.
All right. Sorry about that. I was going to abstain.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine. Mateo?
Yes.
Scott?
Yes.
Rachel?
Yes.
Jess,
Yes.
David,
Yes.
Brittany,
Yes.
Brent,
Yes.
Adam,
Yes.
and me, yes. Okay. So the invoices are approved. Next is we're going to discuss and rank the ranking evaluation criteria. So who is going to handle that? Which Chris?
I can handle that,
Okay.
Mr. Chair. So just to quickly touch on the schedule, because I think it's important to understand as it relates to both the rankings that we're eventually going to do and what's coming up on the project. We are about halfway between our first phase here. We are looking at a July completion for PDP, so we're a little more than halfway through. And in discussions with the working group, we're proposing July 8th as the public forum. This relates to the evaluation because currently we have tonight's meeting and another meeting scheduled at the end of June. Those two meetings are where we're really going to look at the options that are being presented by TAP A. And choosing July 8th gives us a chance after this committee has seen all the options to consider rankings, both in terms of how you plan to rank, but also understand what the options are before you rank. By meeting with the public on July 8th, it'll give us a chance to share all the things that have been shared with all of you, as well as your comments with the public as a whole in advance of what we expect to be a ranking meeting on or around the 13th of July. We do understand the comments that have been raised by some members about this forum occurring later, but in discussion with the working group, we felt that having that forum as part of at the appropriate time for where the work was more important than trying to fit it in before folks leave at the end of the school vacation time for the summer. Next slide, please. So we like to discuss evaluation criteria on these projects because I think process is an important part of any MSBA job. At the end of the day, the phase that we're in, the preliminary design program or PDP, is about choosing the options that are advancing to the next stage. We're really trying to figure out which of the options presented from a test fit basis best represent the type of project that you would like to see more out of. And you're selecting those options on the basis that those options will be developed in the next phase. So this is not a determination of whether we're choosing the Hemingway site or whether we're choosing the Bethany site. It's a determination of what are the best options to move forward in terms of new construction options, add reno options, and a base repair option that is required by the MSBA. We're going to look at a number of those options today, but before we did that, we wanted to just have a first touch base with the committee about what you felt are the appropriate evaluation criteria for evaluating those options against themselves. So if you're looking at two Hemingway options, which one rises to the top? What are the important things, objective criteria that you can select that will point you in the right direction to choose what is most advantageous or least advantageous to move on to the next stage? During the PSR stage or preferred schematic report stage, we're going to have a much more in-depth discussion about the appropriateness of the various options that do move forward. TAP A is going to continue to develop those options, so we'll have a lot more detail and we'll really get into the thick of it. We sent these criteria to the committee in advance, and we thought it made sense to sort them into or parse them out really from what is really about choosing the right site and the right location, and what is really about what is really applicable to all of the sites and can be useful in differentiating between the various options. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Anissa, and she's going to walk you through a little trick that we picked up from our visioning expert, David Stephen, so that we can rank some of these criteria that we feel are appropriate, and so that we can ask you if there's any criteria that you feel should be added.
Thanks, Chris. So I put in the chat a link to my Mentimeter presentation. And if you give me a second, I will pull it up and start sharing that as well. So basically, if you click the link, you can use your phone or use your computer and you can live rank all the different criteria that we have. So ahead of this meeting, I will say Chris and I I could only put 12 on the list. So we kind of took a few off, some that maybe didn't relate as much to the site, and we can add them back in when we get to the PSR stage. So if you want to go ahead and do that now, if you have any questions or you didn't get the link or it's not working, please let me know. And I will share my screen and we should be able to see live the rankings start to take shape of what you think is most important. I see a couple of questions. Scott, I'll start with you.
Yeah, thank you. Actually,
So
you've already.
hold on for a second. So I'm going to ask that we do go through the chairman, okay, just on these meetings to see how we just.
Sorry.
That's all right. And so Scott, why don't you go ahead? Sorry, I will show my video here. I apologize. All right, Scott, what's your issue?
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, Nissa, thank you. First off, you answered the question I had about why there were 17 options in the deck and only 12 in the Mentimeter.
Yep.
Having said that, one of the ones that I don't see is the whole idea of phasing and swing space, which I think is going to end up being a significant consideration depending upon which option we evaluate. So I do have some concerns that that's not one of the 12 that we can prioritize. And then I also just wanted to clarify the one about impact to neighbors and neighborhood, because we're looking at two potential sites. When I think about impact to neighbors and neighborhood, it's either a positive and or negative to both neighborhoods, right? So doing it at Hemingway is going to have a certain impact on the Hemingway neighborhood. It's also going to have an impact on the Bethany neighborhood because we're not doing it at Bethany and vice versa. So I just wanted to clarify, am I thinking about that in the right way?
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I think we could potentially look at breaking that down as to impact. I don't know, Chris, what's your thought? I think we could probably do an impact to Bethany and then impact
So
to Hemingway
part of
separately.
part of the process that we used for breaking these down is to understand these evaluation criteria don't necessarily need to be a comparison between what we do at Bethany and what we do at Hemingway now. We will have an involved discussion of that through the PSR, but we would recommend that at this time we choose one ad reno at Hemingway, one new construction at Hemingway, one Bethany road new construction, and that all of those advance. And if the committee feels it's necessary, others could advance as well. So we would have more options, and that would factor into the evaluation that we do now. What we don't recommend at this time is to be weighing Bethany options against Hemingway options, because each of the options really either work or don't in terms of how they're presented on the screen. The other thing that I'll say is that while we could only list 12 in our initial ranking here, the second slide that we'll get to in a minute is a word cloud. So if there was something that the committee felt was not represented in these 12 options that we proposed to be ranked, we can have you add those in, and then we'll analyze those between now and the next meeting and bring back the top ranked criteria, as well as the items that come from the word cloud that are consistently recommended by folks on the committee.
Yeah, so to that end, I think I'll recognize Brent, but then I think we should go through this. And then if we find something missing or something that wasn't, as inclusive or involved, then we can maybe talk about it then. But instead of like trying to anticipate it ahead of time, I just fear we're going to make a relatively long presentation longer. So Brent, then I have one technical issue, then we'll start. So go ahead.
My only question, and I'm not an expert by any means, but are anonymous surveys allowed via open meeting law? I would defer to someone else with greater knowledge.
Right. Well, I mean, anonymous votes or not, but I mean,
I've seen this same system used in other school building committees.
yeah, I agree. I think that's an interesting question, to be honest with you, from a strictly legal point of view, but I think I'm going to take our chances and do it and see what happens. Okay. So the only technical question I would have, and maybe it's me, but if I press and get that up on the screen, then I lose the Zoom screen on my screen. Is that just me or is everybody challenging with this? I guess what I'm saying is, how do I get that link on a different device?
You can copy and paste it would probably be the easiest way. It are you able to grab the QR code so that someone with a phone could scan it, Anissa?
Yeah, give me 1 second. I think I have to get out of this.
All right. You like?
Let me stop sharing for a second and then I'll pop it back up. Just give me 1 sec.
Thanks.
What we were trying to do is avoid opening this up to everyone from the community viewing to also weigh in. We wanted to solicit the opinions of the panelists.
All right.
Let me see if I can drop that in the chat. Okay,
Hey.
I sent the QR code. You might have to download it to view it.
It should just be.
If it's just me, I'll work something out here. I'm trying to keep an eye on the meeting and also the screen and also the questions. So, all right. So let's move forward.
Okay, sorry. Let me start this again, and I will share my screen. Give me 1 sec. Can everyone see the ranking there?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yep. Okay. Oh yeah. What are we doing now?
So has everybody had a chance to enter their rankings, or does anybody need another minute? If you need another minute, feel free to raise your hand in the Zoom. All right, so why don't we move on to the next one, Anissa?
Okay.
Where do we put the rankings?
So if you go to the chat, there's a link you can click, and it will give you the opportunity to rank the items that are on the screen in terms of the criteria that we are selecting to evaluate the options that come in at the end of this phase. It's to evaluate the options on the sites they are, not to compare between the various sites.
Okay, so I'm going to move on to the next one. Let me see. And so this one should use the same link, and you should be able to type in any criteria that you think is missing. And it's live, so as you do it, it should pop up on the screen.
So in the interest of time, if you've finished typing anything that you'd like to add, if you could just put your hand up, that way we know that we're not cutting anybody short.
I know this is getting confusing, but I'd rather use real hands for responding to them because virtual hands, I think you want to speak, okay? So if you want to speak, leave your virtual hand up. Otherwise, let's just use real hands. Yes, I know it's a pain, but it's just the way through.
And I do want to say we are saving this and we can distribute it to everybody afterwards as well. Because we're kind of moving a little quickly here, but I just wanted to let you know that we can share it after.
Okay. Why don't we move on unless someone objects to the next.
So we'll summarize this and we'll report back on all of it for discussion at the next meeting.
Okay.
Thank you. I appreciate it. All right, if I do this. We are back. Can everyone see the presentation again? Should be sharing that. We can go on to the TAP A presentation.
Okay, so we're ready. So that's it for that, and we're ready for the next agenda item.
Yep.
Okay. Okay,
Are
go
you,
ahead.
are you ready, Mr. Chair?
Yes, I am. Go ahead, Chris.
Okay, great. All right, so we're going to run through the options here that we've started with, and these are preliminary and sort of beginning to put rails around the strategies that we had presented earlier. To remind you a little bit, here are the Framingham site constraints, Hemingway site constraints of the existing building and site. And so there's really two major access points. Those are the red arrows on the front, the building in yellow, and then the big solid black line is the buildable area. Inside of that is what is the buildable area. And then you can start to decipher some of the setbacks with the different dotted lines and dashed lines and things like that, along with flood zones and steep slopes. And so not the easiest site to deal with. You can go to the next slide. And so we talked to you about the strategies, and each of these options so far, you're going to see on the upper right-hand corner is the strategy that the option's related to. And so this one was the option or strategy where we had an addition up in the top left corner. Another reminder is that there's essentially 3 building separation lines in the building. And so it's not super important for right now, but that's where we kind of broke the building apart in different ways. So this option is a 3-story renovation addition option at the Hemingway. It's called AR1. It has a major addition in the back of the building, which is about a 2-story spot, but it's big spaces like the gym and mostly the gym. And then the 3-story addition on the front. There's a portion of this building you can see on the right hand, sort of right middle. There's a key, and then there's a floor plan. These, what we hope you will do is take these after the meeting. They were in your packet too, and you can start to evaluate and review those a little bit more in depth. But these are at PDP level, really supposed to be sort of at a glance at this point. We'll get more detail as we get going further. But this one has that little arm that sticks out over the parking lot. This manages to keep drop off and pick up in circulation because it's tight already, and then create more space above that. And so that's AR1, 3-story addition renovation. You can go to the next slide. So AR2 is a 2-story addition renovation. Again, similar strategy with the addition in the back, which adds space for gym and cafeteria. And then, as you can see in the top right-hand corner, the blue area that says addition, that's the part of the building that we would take down and rebuild. And so that allows us to get a 2-story building because we're getting more space to build new and actually make right-sized and right-programmed for the building. And so the big differentiator between AR1 and AR2 at this point would be the 2-story addition renovation option. And that's what you see here. No big arm cantilevering out over the site. And so, so this is a 2-story addition renovation with addition in the back and the front. Right. And go to the next slide. And so AR3 was looking at basically replacing the entire front part of the building, maintaining some of the courtyard that's there now, but building a 3-story option, a 3-story portion of the building that's in this plan on the top, and then a smaller portion on the lower bit of the plan in the plan view. And another sort of, all these have a similar strategy where we're trying to put big space at the back end of the building, which is the, in this instance, it's an expanded cafeteria. And then the reason for the 3-story addition is because part of it is a 2-story gym. So another option here, this would have a similar appeal or similar look as the existing school, just a bit taller. You can go to AR4. And then AR4 is looking at an option that replaces the entire back part of the building. So that right now houses the gym and music and some portable buildings. And so what we're doing here is trying to academically rebuild all the classroom space, 3-story addition on the back, and then create and renovate all the space on the front side of the building and create a new gym. One comment that was just made in your criteria evaluations from one of the members was about phasing and logistics and planning for especially the Hemingway options, which is going to require us to find alternative space or put modulars on the site. And so that's the next layer of information we're going to start putting on all of these so that you can understand that impact. But right now we're just looking at initial strategies and options that come from strategies. And so you can look at the next slide, please. And so now we're going to pivot into a few new options on the Hemingway site. This is part of what the MSBA requires us to do. We have to show that we looked at completely new builds on the same site. And so that means just tearing the whole thing down. And so we've got a couple of ideas here on strategy. The one here, this first one, is a more typical school that you would find in more kind of rural contexts or semi-rural suburban communities. And it's got the wings and the differentiated learning communities, but it's only 2 stories. And so that allows us to get space on windows on all sides. It's solar oriented. So if you actually rotate this around for north, we're able to reposition the long axes of the building where there's students all day long so that they have a good southern and northern exposure instead of the east-west side. And so that's beneficial to the sustainability side, which is you'd have to do other things on the other options we've shown so far. So we're looking at here a 2-story option as a new building on the site. There's going to be other layers of circulation and things like that coming with all of these sites as well, where we'll start talking about bus loops and cars and pedestrians and drop-offs and stuff like that. But for now, it's just these initial test fits. You can go to the next slide. And so we looked at another version of that, which is a 3-story building, which allows us to pull back from the street. You can see that strategy is basically taking the one wing and stacking it on top of the other, but a similar backside footprint. But this allows us to get a little bit more off the street, which is going to be a little bit more advantageous for the amount of students on this site and how we can do circulation. Hang on, my lights just went off. Sorry about that. And it allows us to get a little bit more circulation on the site, which again, we'll start diagramming for the next pass. Yep, you can go to the next slide. And then the sort of final Hemingway option, new option that we looked at is a more urban type school where it's just a big block, like kind of a big solid block in the middle of the site. This allows us to get very dense on the programming and start to really pack things into a floor plate that isn't long or wing driven, but it's more central and sort of neighborhood driven on the floor plate itself. And so we'll talk more about that in future presentations, but Chris and Vertex actually really wanted us to study the urban school option on this site just to see what how the committee feels about that as a new option. And so I agree, and we should be showing this, and hopefully we can get some traction on that being what it needs to be for 900. And again, remember, there's 985 students in all of these options, K through 12 or K through 5. Sorry. You can go to the next option. Next slide. All right. So shifting to the Bethany Road site, we wanted to kind of highlight some of the site constraints here. Again, I think we've shown a slide like this before, but the buildable area again is inside that sort of solid dashed line. And then we have some steeper slopes in the sort of salmon color, and the mid-grade slopes are in purple, and then the sort of flat areas are in the green lime color. And so the middle of the site, right where it says buildable area, is actually the low part of the site. So we're kind of in a valley, like a U shape, almost like a glacial push valley here of land. And that's where the best usable site is, and it's the most accessible. And it's actually the elevation that the main site road enters in right now. And so we just kind of wanted to bring that attention. The dashed lines on the right and the dashed line on the left are sort of the ridge lines of the two sort of top parts of the hills. And so we have that going through, we have that valley in the middle. So that's that'll orient you on how these next few options shake up. So you can go to the next slide. Okay, so we have here a 2-story option on this site, which is a 2-story and actually 3-story to the left. Could be both in some degree. And so we're trying to show that here where we can, this is similar to our interview site scheme too, where we have this this floor plate that you enter into on the first floor, the second floor stacks above that, and then the third floor has the last grade of classrooms, and then the middle of the building actually has all the core elements like gym and media and all of that stuff. And so so this one would sit down at in the bottom of the valley, and then kind of nestle itself up against the hill where we can do some transition in landscape and drop off and maybe even make the second floor an entry on that side. But we still need to study how all that works, which we're doing right now. You can go to the next slide. And another sort of option and shape for the building is this is kind of the, I don't know, you want to call that a hockey stick or whatever you want to say for the shape, but this one gets us to a little bit more of a concentric core where the core spots come more public. So you can see those elements. They're sort of in the first floor plan. The gym and the media and the cafeteria and service are all on the left-hand side, but those are front facing. And so if you have community events, folks don't have to go through the building, which the other option would have had people go through the building to the more back part of the site or the building. And then, so this one kind of flips that, and it gives us the ability to wrap. I don't know that it'll take this final form at the end of the day, but the idea is that it kind of wraps around that hill in some form or shape and puts the public spots or the big program spots that can be used after hours and for public use more towards the front of the building. And then you can really get a sectioning off of the building and keep them compartmentalized for evening use. You can go to the next slide. And then we did this this option, which is what we're calling the dual school option. So this is we'll talk more about this as we go further into the process here. But this option is looking at what if it became viable or feasible for us to do the dual school, exactly what it says. And that's that we just renovate Hemingway. We prove out that the building is okay for school now, and it needs to be renovated for sure. But for a school of about 493 students, it works, and we can make that doable on site with pre-K. And then on Bethany Road, we have a school of about an equal amount of students with pre-K out there on that side. And so you're splitting the required population from the MSBA into basically two schools. One gets a pretty decent renovation to it with systems and everything that needs to be upgraded, and the other is a new building. And the idea here is that if we run into the need to have schools in both locations, or we find out that a 985 students, which will be the largest elementary school in Framingham at this point, if that becomes unwieldy or anything like that, this is an option that we would definitely have to get more in depth with the MSBA on in terms of their acceptance of it, or even us being able to continue to pitch it to them. But for the sake of turning over stones and making sure we looked at all of the things available to us, we started to study this one as well. And so I think you can go to the next slide. And then the renovation only here is the option that the MSBA also requires us to do. That's not this one, but this is the D1. So this is the reno option, the school part of the dual school option. So it doesn't, the renovation only option looks just like this actually. So it doesn't do much to the school's population, doesn't expand it, doesn't grow. The nature of building the second school allows some pre-K to come into the building because you're generating capacity shift. And so that's why we can put pre-K in it as a dual school option, but as a renovation only, we would be hard pressed to get much else into the building. So you can go to the next slide. And then the floor plan for the new smaller school, again, is able to get all of the large programs up to the front of the building. And you'll see these common threads where we're trying to get the learning communities by grade differentiated and programmed out so that we can get the learning communities sorted that way. And so this is where that option is right now, looking at the two dual school plans themselves. You can go to the next slide. And so that's the quick run through of options. Again, you should have these in your packet and be able to sort of sit with them a little bit more and analyze and kind of think through them. I think the goal for tonight, and I'll hand it over to the chair after I say this, is to for you guys to, if you have questions about thought process behind any of these, and more specifically and more urgently to the process, is we want to know if there's any major options that need to be added to this that someone is thinking about we didn't already investigate. And that's really what we need to kind of get to understanding, is if we've kind of captured all the option ideas, even though they could evolve and permeate along the way. Changes, if you have anything to say about those, we can take them now too. But really, we're kind of looking for, did we kind of capture the breadth of options available? And then we can start to hone in and use the selection criteria to kind of make some go away or continue studying other aspects. So, Mr. Chair, I'll let you take the vote.
Okay, thank you. So who has questions that they would like to, or comments to follow up on?
Mr. Chair, I do, if I could. Thank you. So just some feedback for Chris. I know we have another presentation of these, of these options in 2 weeks. And you had mentioned a couple times us taking some time to sort of sit with these. Thinking about that, I think there's a couple challenges with the way this is presented now. One is these little floor thumbnails are totally unreadable. And so I don't know if it's possible to get sort of larger visualizations of what the floor plates would look like for each of these options. I'm guessing they started out big and we shrunk them down to fit them on a slide. And then the other thing that I'm thinking is going to be a challenge as we start to assess these options, and you alluded to this on a couple of them, is what does the rest of the site look like? I know we're still early stage, but you mentioned like what part is at the front of the school? What part is at the back of the school? What does circulation look like? Do we have enough parking? Is there room for parking and bus loops and all that stuff? I'm not suggesting that we go deeper than we need to from a design perspective, but I'm finding it challenging to assess these based upon what I'm seeing so far.
Yeah, thank you. I think I was trying to mention earlier, these first passes aren't meant to get into the weeds of in depth of assessment. We were hoping to present these as a first pass to say, this is the lay of the land, as sort of like you're looking at them at 30,000 feet. And then we can start to layer in more details of like, okay, now I understand, the general shape and the strategy. Now I can layer in the traffic response, and we can get into more details about the plans. At this phase, you're not really taking one off you're not taking plans off the table because of program or plan layout necessarily, because they're all totally shiftable. It's really just how we're trying to fit these on site and that kind of thing. But point noted, and we'll try to get you some larger plans to look at in more detail as we go forward.
Shreya?
Thank you. I had a couple of thoughts or comments. One was that it's kind of difficult to know if we need any more options or if what we have is sufficient in that I think there is a little bit of a disconnect between the overall footprint diagram on the left and then some of the articulated floor plans that you're showing on the right. It's hard to make that jump between scales, if you know what I mean. And I think it might help if you did a drawing in between that just explain big picture wise some of the large scale moves that you're trying to express in the floor plans, because it's kind of hard to follow, as Scott said, where the entrance is, how you might circulate and weigh that against the floor plans. Because, for example, if you go to maybe option, let's say NC1, there's just so much articulation in the design that it almost feels like it's already designed. Rather than it feeling a little bit more like a diagram. Does that make sense?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I mean, we're baking ideas into these, like how to, yeah, I think so. The layer that's not in depth here is that we are putting into these, we're already trying to engulf, like, I don't know, ingest things that were talked about in the ed program and ed visioning sessions. And so that's a whole layer of information that this committee has reviewed and looked at. And so we're putting those in, but it would be for us to go and diagram every single one of these, like we would be like, it would be hours. And to kind of talk through that again, floor plan basis. And so we can definitely layer in and talk through a little bit more of it, but it's, I mean, the big move is you're trying to get a 985 student school to feel smaller by doing schools within schools and community, like neighborhood clusters. And so that's why you'll see these divisions, like particularly in this plan, there's a cluster and then it bends a little bit and then there's another cluster and then there's a core and then there's another cluster. And so that's kind of the strategy of like, how do you do that on a site?
But I guess the only thing I'd say is just that we have a list of evaluation criteria, but then it's kind of difficult to see that criteria being met in the plans. So
yeah,
just
so like I said before,
helpful.
these are the first pass, right? We're trying to show you at a glance, first pass, like the first attempt to show detail on an option is not at 1/4 inch scale, zoomed in so far that you can't understand how it goes. And so what we're trying to say is, okay, I can understand the party. I just want to know more. Like you're saying, you're curious about the next level. So the next time you see these, we zoom in a little bit further and we start to diagram out different things related to the floor plan layout or the school, how we want it to, teaching and learning and things like that. And so the idea with this first pass is, generally speaking, at PDP, we're doing a very high level lay of the land sort of thing. This is how it's oriented, these like basic things like that. Like this is south oriented, it follows the path of the sun and things like that. And so, yeah, so we'll continue to add more. I think you're asking for more detail. You want to know how the school
I'm
lays out.
actually,
So do you have another question, Shreya?
I was just saying, I'm actually asking for less detail, if that makes sense. I think just like knowing what the big picture site strategies are would be helpful. That's all.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. Brittany?
Thank you. I think my comment does touch on what Shreya is mentioning. One thought I had is it possible to add maybe like a couple of bullet points on each slide for each of these like proposals? Just laying out like the pros and cons of each of these designs, because what I heard like some really great voiceover as you were going through each slide, but pretty much lost it immediately, if that makes sense. So if there were a few bullet points on each slide just really highlighting why you think this is a good option versus a bad option. I think that would be helpful.
We can do that for sure.
Brent?
Especially with the current Hemingway site, as we were looking through options, parking was just something that kept coming up in my mind as we figure out how to provide parking for this many staff. Are we allowed to consider parking garages or structures that would expand parking access?
They're not funded by the MSBA, so it'd be completely ineligible.
Gotcha. The other question I had was, given the different options, especially, what am I looking at? The one currently on our screen will do. Elevator shafts and the number of elevators that would be needed to have the space be accessible, especially considering the student population we're looking to serve.
Yeah, I think we would plan for one elevator in a building like this. I wouldn't, I mean, yeah, I wouldn't put two in unless there was a specific like driver for that. But building this size, we could definitely do one.
Other questions? Okay, so Chris, what's the next step with this? In 2 weeks or what?
Well, the next schedule, I think Chris, I don't know if that was for Eberly or Blesson.
No, that
The
was
next-
first. I mean, what your next step is to how you're gonna move
Yep.
from here.
So my next step and TAPA's next step designing wise is that we add all that detail that we just talked about that the building committee is asking for, and less detail in the sense that we want to show you the sort of key site drivers and how we're responding to that. I think so we've noted those comments. We'll figure out a way to graphically show these and get you guys more into pros and cons and drivers and things like that on these. We'll start to layer in all the information on the site and the flow and the parking and all of those kinds of things, the pros and cons, like that's coming. The one thing that I think Eberly is going to talk to you about in a second is whether or not we need a meeting on June 15th, I think is the proposed date. And if not, then we can continue to develop these and go to June 29th, and we'll start to get more pricing level numbers and stuff like that coming through the beginning of July. But the big question is, if there's no options that seem like, if we hadn't done the dual school option, someone might say on this committee, hey, I think there's a dual school option you haven't done. Can you do that? And so right now we're sort of trying to shake that out. Like, is there some permutation? Someone could say, have you looked at a 5-story school on Hemingway? There's a lot of reasons why or 4-story school. I don't know. But like, if someone has a very specific thing you've been thinking about that doesn't seem in some form or fashion covered by the option set we've provided, then I think we would want to know that. And we can add that to the list and meet on the 15th to discuss it, or we can just continue to put all this options to detail and explanation and try to help bring clarity. And that would be probably on the 29th. So I think that's, Mr. Chair, that's for you and your committee to decide.
Okay. So Chris, Eberly, you want to say anything about this?
Yeah, so in discussion with the working group, as Chris alluded to, one of the questions that came up is the level of detail that the committee would like to see. And I think tonight's comments have been helpful in illustrating the level of detail that you're looking for. One of the questions that was raised in that discussion was whether it made sense to have a meeting on the 15th so that we had more opportunities to see development prior to getting to the final evaluation. As the schedule sets up now, if you take that bold meeting off of the list, the 29th would be our next get together, which would have a month of development for TAP A headed into that meeting. During that time, we would forward all options that we had. So that would be more of a reporting with minor changes on the 29th and those minor changes would be forwarded to the estimators. The estimators' costs are likely to come in around the 9th. And so around the time that we have the public forum would report on the work that has been reviewed at this meeting and on the 29th with the development. And then this committee would come back together on the 13th of July, where you would evaluate based on criteria that we all agree on. The question, or the open question, the committee that we wanted to raise tonight is, based on what you've seen, does it make sense to add an additional meeting in the middle of June so that you would have more opportunity to comment on development and shape the direction that this goes?
Okay. Scott, do you have another question, or what you had that for though?
You're muted, Scott.
Thanks. I do that at least once a day. Sorry, Mr. Chair. So I was actually going back to the question that I think Chris from TAPE raised about, are there options that we're not seeing here? And this ties back to that dual school option. We've talked about the importance of keeping the Hemingway property as an active part of the school district fabric. But I don't know personally that splitting the enrollment between the two schools is really going to buy us anything. I mean, the greater shortage is seats on the south side. So keeping half of them in the existing site, keeping half of them in the existing site, I don't think actually buys us anything. What I would love to see, and I don't know if it actually fits with the MSBA ground rules or something, I would love to see an option where Hemingway stays as a pre-K or as a pre-K-K, not as a pre-K-5. And we actually continue with the idea of shifting that population to the Bethany site. I don't know if that makes sense. I feel like I'm kind of rambling, but that's one option that I don't see here. Again, I don't know if that's a viable option from an MSBA perspective, but we've talked about it multiple times, the importance of keeping Hemingway in the picture.
Well, I see a couple of hands up, so but my first reaction to that, Scott, would be that's really, something that whether we're going to have a pre-K site like that is really more of a school committee decision than a school building committee decision. But anyways, Jess.
I think I saw Adam's hand up before mine. Is this up still? I'm happy to next.
Go ahead. You got recognized. You had a hand up.
So thanks, Scott, for bringing that point. I think you make an important point. My point was, I have 2 points. One was just going back to the packet materials of the site. So for example, we're not seeing on these plans for the Bethany location any of the similar structure as we're seeing on the Hemingway site, and that's based on the scale of the Bethany site. Is that correct? So for example, we don't see option AR1 sketched out on the Bethany project for that purpose, right?
Well, anything that's labeled AR is a specific building that is tied to the keeping of renovating that building, right? So you wouldn't have anything in the AR categories would not exist in that form or shape or anything on Bethany because you don't have an existing building to renovate or add to.
But I'm thinking of like a similar footprint, and it'd be probably site dependent for that adjustment to be made to put a similar footprint on Bethany.
Okay.
Well, like a courtyard organization, would that be a better way to describe it?
I think so.
Okay.
And the three. So okay, that answers that part of my question. And then the second thing I just wanted to note is regarding the additional meeting in bold. I think I would lean toward having an additional meeting just to be able to work out some of these and get some more questions. And I think Brittany made a good point also about having the bullet points. And then to Shreya's point of like the actual like zoom out of like where are people coming from, where the parking and the drop-off situation is going to be positioned. So that's all. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Building on some of the prior comments, when you are able to hopefully add some bullet points or descriptions for each item, whether it's directly on the slides or both with the corresponding document, I think adding the favorable outcomes for what each design gets us when it comes to all of the different goals that the district has and the city has with this project, that's one piece. I also like what Mr. Wadland said about kind of multiple options. If I was my choice, I would keep your two school option as well as a Hemingway pre-KK or pre-K2 and see how that changes and shifts if that's not too much workload. And the reason I say that is if there's any hope of getting MSBA funding for that, I believe we do owe it to do that review, as well as the mayor's executive order creating this committee did put that in our scope, both for pre-K expansion, wherever that may be across the entire city. So it is something that I think should be considered. And then whether or not we have another meeting, I lean towards yes. But I'm also curious if someone could help me understand a little bit more about when the pricing will come in, how that works, and remember some of the pricing challenges of a prior project just from changes over years and escalation. And just want to make sure that there's a great deal of thought and the appropriate disclaimers before any of those prices come out. Thank you.
Yeah, so we would get pricing back in early July, and in early July we would Tape and Vertex would go through a process where we add in the estimates themselves actually come back with escalation on them, and then Vertex and Tape will have a conversation around the soft cost and additional contingencies that we think should be added. For example, the soft cost for an addition renovation on Hemingway are going to be higher than a new building on Bethany because you don't have some of the additional adders like phasing, temporary school, temporary conditions, stuff like that. And so the soft costs are going to be different for the two sites and each option too. And so we'll go through a process of giving you all of that, showing you very clearly how it's generated and how it works. And and then I think that as we get further down the road, you'll start to get all the clarity that comes with this. And I just want to put a reminder out there that you're not selecting the option at the end of PDP. And so really your job at this point, you can take as many options as you want into PSR, although it's probably advisable to cull some of them out if you can, like the big ones that are going to survive or don't have merit. We can take those off the table and spend our energy going through other options in the PSR that are more in line with district goals and milestones, or not milestones, objectives. And so I think that the PSR is when you really, really get down to like business on like really understanding them. PDP is kind of more, we're throwing a bunch of stuff out there and we're doing it fairly quickly and getting order of magnitude numbers related to them. And so that's really the process that we're in right now and what's going to happen over the next 2 months, really, June and July.
Yeah,
So,
I can clarify those 2 points a little bit more, Chris. In terms of the pricing at PDP is about looking at your typical MSBA school and trying to apply the same metric to how the different options appear on the page. So it's about figuring out, if we do this, is this one going to be more costly than the next? It's not necessarily dialing into the specific detailed cost analysis that you'll get at PSR. It's really about, if the average Massachusetts school is somewhere between $950 to $1,000 a square foot, and that's not I'm just pulling that out of the air. The fact that this one has more foundation, or this one has more floors, or this one has more fields, or this one has more parking. How does that create relative cost differences from scheme to scheme to scheme, so that you can look at that and say, well, these ones are more costly. Do the other elements of those schemes warrant that continuing, despite the fact that we think they're more costly, versus these are the cheapest schemes, but they don't check all the boxes for the other reasons. And so it's about making that assessment. Also, to the point of the sort of pre-KK, one of the things that Tape and Vertex have discussed is that some of the other work that's being done with demography, with the existing school study, is to establish an approach to pre-K that is not yet fully developed, and that's why it doesn't appear in a lot of the schemes. All of these schemes could have a certain degree of pre-K added to them. So one of the things that TAPE is working to better understand is the right way to make some of those assessments about pre-K. And that ties into an item that we didn't include in tonight's presentation, which is the MSBA space summary. That's really a product that comes out of the educational plan that's going to be voted on at school committee on Wednesday. And so we really want to understand, once that's confirmed by school committee, the details of that space summary, which gets into the details of the size of your school, and also how much pre-K we choose to put in. Is there enough space vacated at other schools that can fit into some of that pre-K so that we can advance that conversation? But Chris is right. All of these discussions, at the end of the day, it's about choosing how many options we really want to develop to a high level. And when we get to the discussion of those options, that's when we're really going to be looking at the different options in comparison to each other in terms of, do we really want new construction? Do we want to consider an ad reno? And where do we want to site the school? Those are really questions for the next year, when we're going to have much more detailed pricing, much more detailed analysis, and much more time to work through all those details.
Thank you. One quick follow-up, Mr. Chair, if I may, just on the pricing.
Yes.
Thank you both. That was a very helpful answer. And so the way I'm thinking for the next meeting or two is more of a, it'd be helpful to know like the ranking of expense from, low to high, high to low, based on all this, without maybe having the exact numbers. Because I think it's so early in that. I am also wondering, this is my last point, when do you give us the what is eligible for MSBA reimbursement and what is ineligible breakdown? Is that part of this next month, or is that something that would be in months away in the future post PDP? Thank you.
From a cost perspective, I would say that it's probably going to be the 13th by the time we get to some of those rankings. There's a lot of little details. That's why I always say that PDP is about establishing relationships and figuring out what you want to put in your building. Because at the end of the day, if you have 12 different schemes, you have 12 different ways to look at it, you'll get 12 different costs, and you might decide that 3 of them move forward. And so cost really isn't the sole driver in all of this. And in terms of determining eligibility, there's an initial pass that occurs once the space summary is developed and submitted to the MSBA. So after we get past that PDP milestone, we'll get the first comments about what is eligible and ineligible from the MSBA. And that really takes more shape in the PSR phase as we analyze the MSBA's comments, as the space summary, as it develops related to the building itself, becomes clearer. And as we understand in better terms the pre-K option that moves forward, that's going to factor into what's eligible and ineligible as well. So it really becomes a PSR discussion.
Thank you.
So right now, our decision really comes down to whether we want to schedule a meeting in 2 weeks or 4 weeks. And I guess Chris, do either of you guys have a strong preference on that or a suggestion on that?
More time is more detail. On
So why don't we do
this?
Why don't we do this? Why don't we plan for the 29th? And if something comes up that you feel would be particularly helpful to have a full meeting, we can put it on the 15th. Does that make sense to people, or what?
Yeah, we can also.
I just don't want to come back and have a meeting without a whole lot of new information.
We can also just spitballing ideas is we can work and start to add layers of information, and then when the 15th comes, we can send an update packet that isn't up for discussion, but just updates the committee on where we are on the 15th, and then we come to the 29th with more information than that, and we discuss it all so that you kind of see where we're at on the 15th, and then the 29th we meet and have all the discussions we need to have. So
yeah, I think that might make some sense. Mr. Wadland.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think that might make sense. My concern is not so much about meeting, but about being sort of unplugged from the work that's going on for the next month, and then coming back and having the next opportunity for feedback be in a month. I think we've talked about a couple things that the committee would like to see in terms of larger visualizations of the floor plates and some pros and cons, and like I don't want to wait until the 29th to get that information. So if we can commit to having just sort of an updated asynchronous packet for the 15th, I'd also like to see the outcome of the Mentimeter stuff that we just did. You know, I don't want the next readout to be a month from now, I guess is what I'm saying. And I'm fine not having a meeting so long as we continue to be plugged into the work that's going on.
All right, so why don't we go with that plan unless anyone, as I said a moment ago, unless anyone objects or feels strongly otherwise. Okay, and that's okay with you, Chris?
Yeah, it's whatever the committee would like to do. We want to make sure that you all feel that you have the relevant information you need to make a decision.
Let's try that and see how we do. Okay, unless there's anything else on that, the next item is the community outreach subcommittee status. I haven't really received any feedback from anybody on that, so Scott, if you're still here, there you are. If you want to say anything else about it, but otherwise, I would just ask if anybody would like to serve on the community outreach subcommittee. Let me know, and I'll put one together.
Yeah, only because you asked for my thoughts, Mr. Chair. My understanding coming out of the last meeting, and I may have misunderstood, I thought that you were going to send something to the committee calling for volunteers. I know of several folks who would like to serve, myself included. I'm actually concerned that we may have more people who are interested than you, because we had said 3 to 4 people on the committee. So I just want to share with the other members, if I could, that if we end up having more people than we can put on the subcommittee, that's not a bad problem. At the end of the day, every single one of us is going to be engaged in outreach to some extent. I think the primary goal of the subcommittee is working with Vertex and TAPE and the district on communication strategy, not necessarily the execution. I think we're all going to be involved in the execution. So I guess what I'm hearing based upon your comment, Mr. Chair, is that individuals should let you know if they are interested in serving on the subcommittee, and then you'll take it from there.
Yes, that's the best way. Yep. Jess?
Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. So I reached out about 2 weeks ago asking, and I never heard back if you had any plans to, if I had missed a communication or if you were planning on this. So can you just walk us through the next steps? You want us to email you, or are you taking volunteers now, or what are the next steps?
Well, I guess I maybe something must have got missed somewhere here. So I will have somebody send out. I will send out, or someone send out. Can someone from Vertex just send out an email tomorrow to everybody asking, and then having anybody who would like, that way anybody who's not here is also covered, and have anybody respond to me by, say, Friday if they want to be involved on the subcommittee.
So my question was if you could just walk us through the next steps. So it's going to be Vertex is going to send out an email, and then within the end of the week, you're going to
And we'll see what we we'll see how many people we have, and then we'll figure it out from there.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for recognizing me.
No, thank you for asking. All right, if there's nothing else, I would take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, moved by Mr. Freibold, seconded by Mr. Lewis. Okay, so I'll vote myself, yes. Adam?
Yes.
Brent?
Yes.
Brittany?
Yes.
Jessica?
Yes.
David?
Yes.
Rachel?
Yes.
Sharia?
Yes.
Scott?
Yes.
And did I miss anybody?
Yep, me,
Okay.
Mr. Alexander. Yes.
Okay. Okay. No, yes. And Mateo, you still with us?
Yes, and yes.
Okay. Great. Thanks, everybody. And so we're all done for tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you.